My talk will cover the indications and the prognostic categories, both of which are very important when deciding who's a likely candidate for the keratoprosthesis. No financial interest. Just to make a point, Dr. Schultz mentioned that the first keratoprosthesis was actually designed way back or used way back in 17th century. One of the things that happened was when the first keratoplasty was performed, keratoplasty then had an upward trajectory, good results. So that's one of the reasons why, apart from the fact that the early keratoprosthesis had a very stormy course, so there was a diverted interest. But now with the Boston keratoprosthesis, we see that definitely the results are there. And this is the entire stable of keratoprosthesis, but we will concentrate on the ones that are currently being done in India, the Boston keratoprosthesis, the Pintucci, and the osteodonto keratoprosthesis. So that's the Boston thing. So briefly put, it's best suited for bilateral corneal pathology, limiting vision in both eyes, and those patients in whom a PK or keratoplasty is likely to fail again or carries a very poor prognosis. One of the things that helps us in decision making is the literature, which has shown that some cases will do well, and those are cases that are good to begin with. And some cases actually require a lot of care, and it's better that once experience is gained, we go on to those cases. So the best cases are usually the non-inflammatory conditions like multiple graft failure, especially from conditions like dystrophies or degenerations, and even aniridia. Though glaucoma is a problem, these cases tend to do well. Recent experience has shown that following herpes, we know that if it recurs in the graft, it's a big problem to manage. So these cases, post-herpetic keratitis, also do well. Chemical burns is next, not so well, because again glaucoma and other problems. And the ones that tend to do worst are the autoimmune and cicatrizing conditions like Stevens-Johnson and mucous membrane pemphigoid. So these cases, this is a case of multiple failed grafts, and you can see there's scars, and these would do well. This is a case of chemical burn, but as you can see there is not too much of the tear function is not too bad, and this can also be managed. And this is a case that has had a previous failed graft, and you can see the amount of limbal stem cell compromise there. So the actual cases that do well are those who are poor candidates for a repeat keratoplasty from previous failed grafts, glaucoma that's been managed by some form of surgery, limbal stem cell deficiency. Cases of corneal vascularization, we know these are at high risk for rejection, and aniridia associated keratopathy. The good candidates for a Boston keratoprosthesis include those for the type 1, those with a good tear film and lid function, poor vision in the contralateral eye. Again, it's important to assess that they have visual potential. And one of the ways to do this is to check the nasal projection, which would tell you that the optic nerve is functioning. Poor candidates for repeat keratoplasty are good candidates for Boston keratoprosthesis, other things being okay. And corneal vascularization and scarring, as I mentioned, these are poor candidates for a repeat graft. Here this is a cornea that has a lot of vascularization. You can make out that there's already a failed graft there. This would do well, again multiple failed grafts. Poor candidates for a K-Pro would be those with comorbid ocular conditions that won't allow good visual recovery, like those with a retinal detachment or a phthisis or an end-stage glaucoma are not going to recover vision anyway, no matter what you do. Severe ocular surface keratinization may be candidates for the type 2 or maybe for an OOKP. And again, patients who are unable to follow up at least early on in the practice, we need to be cautious. So as Dr. Schultz mentioned, last resort or first choice. For traditionally believed that it would be a primary treatment option for a good treatment option for those with repeat graft failure or aniridia. But now surgeons with accrued experience would know that it can be a primary option in cases like hepatic post-hepatic keratitis scarring and pediatric corneal opacities. So the expanding indications from the traditional now would be like post-hepatic limbal stem cell deficiencies and children. This was a case of Moran's ulcer again. This patient was operated 3 months ago, and I saw the patient last week. At 3 months is doing quite well. As we know, a traditional keratoplasty would probably not do well in this patient. Again, limbal stem cell deficiency. This was an article from Dr. Aldavi's group, which showed that the results supported the use of the Boston type 1 in managing bilateral non-immune mediated limbal stem cell deficiency. A little about pediatric keratoprosthesis. It's controversial, debated. We know that a high level of care is always required in pediatric patients, even post-keratoplasty, so even more so following a keratoprosthesis, and the risk of complications can be devastating. Recent literature shows that it appears to be a good treatment option, even primary, in pediatric corneal opacities, because it rapidly establishes a clear visual axis. Otherwise, these are destined to develop amblyopia. Retention has not been a problem per se with the Boston K-Pro type 1, that we know with experience. And the initial series have shown manageable complications. Essentially, there are two categories: the congenital, which is Peters anomaly, sclerocornea, glaucoma causing corneal scarring, congenital hereditary endothelial dystrophy. We know that endothelial keratoplasty is also done in these cases, and dysgenesis, anterior segment dysgenesis. The non-congenital indications could be forceps delivery, birth canal infection, post-traumatic scarring. For the Pintucci keratoprosthesis, again, bilateral probably in the initial cases, accurate perception of light in all quadrants in the eye to be operated, and a B scan showing an attached retina and an axial length that's more than 18 millimeters. The inclusion criteria to continue would be no history of or evidence of long-standing or absolute glaucoma, evaluated in the best way that's possible for these cases. And if it's post-traumatic, then you leave a reasonable interval before we go ahead with surgery. The osteodontokeratoprosthesis is the one of choice for end-stage corneal blindness, where the ocular surface is hostile, and dry keratinized eyes following Stevens-Johnson's or mucous membrane pemphigoid. Probably no other device would work as well as this, but as you know, it's a 2-stage prolonged procedure. The referral guidelines would be, again, end-stage SJS and mucous membrane pemphigoid, multiple graft failures where there is no other option, severe chemical burns, severe dry eye. Contraindications are, again, it is a surgery that requires a lot of expertise and a lot of care. So patients who manage with the level of vision that they have, probably you would wait. Children less than 17 years of age, eyes with no perception, evidence of phthisis or advanced glaucoma or irreparable RD, you won't go there. So overall, now we are seeing good results in well-selected cases. For me, my experience is with the Boston keratoprosthesis, and it requires a long-term commitment to follow-up and care. So when choosing patients, be systematic. We know that keratoprosthesis is performed in more challenging eyes. The indications have expanded, and now you would consider it as a primary treatment option in some cases. One study showed that the cost effectiveness is comparable to that of a keratoplasty. So it definitely remains a viable option in salvaging vision in well-selected cases of bilateral corneal blindness. Thank you.